Today, it is my pleasure to be speaking with Sheena Brady of the founder of Tease Tea and the Founders Fund. Welcome, Sheena, and thank you for joining me today to talk to my audience about the importance of knowledge sharing. Sheena, would you like to start by sharing how the Funders Fund serves women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me as your guest. So the Tease Tea, it was originally called the Tease Tea Founders Fund, which was under my company, Tease Tea, an
Mhm.
e-commerce company that's dedicated to empowering women one cup at a time by choosing the right type of tea to complement your goals and desires. And so
Mhm.
we have a give back program. And one of those programs that we had was this Founders Fund that we brought to life in 2019, bringing together entrepreneurs and saying, what are you doing to pay your success forward? And that came in the form of both mentorship and pooled funding to pay it forward and give those opportunities to other budding women identifying entrepreneurs. And so basically in 2019, the concept of the Founders Fund really ended up becoming bigger than Tease Tea, bigger than myself, bigger than we could have ever imagined. We
Mhm.
clearly were filling a void that we didn't realize existed to the extent that it does. And so we realized we have an opportunity to create even more impact for 2020. And with that, we've actually shifted slightly in terms of our model of the program. And it's now becoming its own company in 2020 as the Founders Fund Canada. And we're proud to share that we've become the first online growth accelerator for women identifying entrepreneurs, giving them access to mentorship, resources, and funding.
Congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
is a great way to reach all those women and to be online and get to where those women are spending their time. I think that's an amazing initiative. So,
Thank you.
congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I believe it's still important for you and your team to have your model so that you're sharing through mentorship and also sharing through other online webinars and that sort of thing. Um, why is it important? Why did you find that it's so important to do that?
Yeah, well, basically, we found that, a lot of women entrepreneurs are facing dynamic barriers, and those barriers are quite complex. The barriers that I might face compared to another woman can be quite dynamic and different, and so really, it's very intersectional, and that just basically means
Mhm.
that, yeah, the barriers look different for each entrepreneur in their journey. And so our job at the Founders Fund is to basically help create spaces and environments that allow entrepreneurs to do what they do best, and we can be a part of problem solving at the same time. So we provide tools, access to funding, and provide the support needed for entrepreneurs at all stages of their entrepreneurial journey to determine what works best for them and their journey. Because, like I said, each journey is unique and will require different kinds of support. And those barriers might look different. Like I said, it could be as simple as the confidence gap, which is a very real thing, huge barrier that I think that a lot of women face in business. That feeling of imposter syndrome, that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, somebody else is already doing this, so why should I?
Yeah.
Then there's, of course, women of color, and the data that kind of sharing that women of color face even more difficult challenges in terms of not only getting
Yeah.
access to funding but also scaling their business as well. And then, of course, like funding businesses that aren't just tech. Of course, like there are many other companies, like businesses and services that exist out there that are not tech focused. And so we try to be intentionally industry agnostic and support all types of businesses in different verticals.
Hmm. I have met some of the women that are part of this program online, and I have to tell you, it just warms my heart whenever I'm speaking to a woman entrepreneur, whether she's in startup mode or whether she is scaling some of the challenges that she's having. And she already has what she needs to be able to do that. But by sharing the knowledge in a community, it allows her to do it much faster and, like you said, with more confidence so that she gets that done. And I've had conversations with some of those women entrepreneurs, and I am amazed at what they're doing, the different types of businesses that they have, and the phase that they are in, and they are still willing or still looking for that support from other women, which I think is amazing.
And I think you hit a very important topic, and that's really kind of addressing where we're going with 2020 for the Founders Fund. We have some very ambitious plans that we haven't shared, publicly yet, but we are going to soon. So I'm happy to share here as well. But basically, this idea that we want to continue this entrepreneurial ecosystem of entrepreneurs supporting entrepreneurs during all stages, and also this idea of continuing to invest in yourself as an entrepreneur
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
while investing in others. And so for 2020, our plan is to raise $250,000 in non-repayable funding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it's a huge number, and it's not a random number we made up. It's a very intentional one. And how we plan to get there is approaching at least, hopefully, 2020 entrepreneurs in 2020, like the whole theme of, it being this exciting new decade. And
Mm-hmm.
basically saying to them, what are you doing to invest in others while investing in yourself? And so it'll be $225 to be a part of this entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that enables you to have access again to that continued mentorship with online access throughout the entire country, different resources. We're going to be doing peer-to-peer mentor matching as well within those pool of applicants, so you have a buddy system in place to help hold each other accountable and support each other. And so with that 225, more than half of that, so $125, goes directly towards the fund, and then the remainder goes towards the programming, admin fees, and of course HST, all the important things to kind of like bring this business forward as its own. And so that's how we plan on getting to $250,000 in non-repayable funding in 2020.
That is a great model. Actually, it's a small investment for the entrepreneur, no matter where she is in her journey. And also, she gets a lot back
A
from
lot.
that investment, right? And even the recognition, like her own recognition that she is contributing to other women entrepreneurs financially and whatever knowledge she can share, I think it's a great model that you've come up with. So I
Thank
congratulate you again. I acknowledge you for coming up with that. There's a large part of the entrepreneurial women's community that are in different generations.
you.
And so I'd like to ask you, what do you think about the intergenerational business relationships? And what do you think we can learn from one another?
Mhm. Well, I think we can learn so much from each other, especially like when we talk about intergenerational. And I think that that's where our selection committee for the Founders Fund in 2019 did a phenomenal job of highlighting our finalists for the funding, from like all different age brackets, really, is where our finalists came from, which is truly remarkable. And I
Mhm.
think that we can just continue to learn so much from the wisdom and lived and shared experiences that women have from all different ages and backgrounds, quite frankly. And so, yeah, I think that like some of my mentors that most closest to actually have like 2 to 3 decades on me of experience, which is just remarkable because there's so much to learn from that. And I learned so much from their shared experiences from over the years, but then vice versa, I find myself demonstrating some value in that mentorship relationship as well, in terms of the way that like I have a lot of accessibility to modern ways of doing e-commerce, for example. And so, whether that's working with Shopify or selling on Amazon and that sort of thing, I'm able to like impart that type of experience as well. So I find it's just a lot of mutual impactful opportunities to learn from each other.
Okay. What have you found to be some of the biases or assumptions that we make in intergenerational business relationships?
I think that some of the biases that we might make are that perhaps, you know, different generations might not be as aware or up to speed on different trends, perhaps, but I don't think that that's necessarily the case either, especially when we live in a world where technology is so, easily gives us an opportunity to really give us the tools, regardless of what generation we might be a part of. We all have equal access to these different opportunities to learn and knowledge share as well. And so I think that that might be one bias, to be honest.
Hmm. And how do you think we can bridge or benefit from that age diversity?
I think the best way to benefit from age diversity is to simply listen. uh, so simply just be present and listen and be open-minded to anyone that you're speaking with at any age. And I like to walk into any conversation just assuming that I'm going to learn something
Mhm.
new. And when you walk in with that assumption, you're already putting your mindset into this shift of like having an open mind, literally, of course. And so, you can leave pretty much any situation learning something new if you walk into it expecting to learn something new because you're anticipating it, you're waiting for it, you're curious, you're asking questions, and you're listening. Most importantly.
What would there be a time when you could have benefited from that wisdom of community?
Yeah. So a time where I did benefit, actually, it was almost 2 years ago. I was on a panel at an event, and part of the event, we were taking headshots after. So there was a photographer on site. And the photographer had been, she had shared she'd been in the industry for, 30 some years basically. So most of her career was basically in this industry. And so her responsibility was to not only take our photos, but then also ask questions to put a quick bio up on a website or something like that. And so the question that she asked me was, "What is your hobby?" And I froze a bit because I always get a little bit uncomfortable with that question because I love tea, obviously, but tea is my business. And so that's kind of like a strange thing to say is your hobby because you think that technically like your business shouldn't be your hobby, right? And so I said to her, I'm like, you know what? I don't really have any hobbies. Like I just have my business and this is what I do. And I was kind of sharing her with her my story. And she said, well, do you feel like you bring your full self to work every day? And I said, absolutely. Like I feel so lucky that I get to bring my full self to work every day and like live truly authentically and be able to express myself through my work every day. And I never feel held back from being my true self at work. And she said, then that's incredible. Like you don't necessarily need to identify as having a hobby or not, because people usually have hobbies as a creative outlet or as a way to, de-stress or as a way to exit the world and all of its chaos. And so she said, if you're showing up every single day, bringing your full self, that's great. Like own that. And that's incredible. And so that was like a wisdom takeaway for me where I shouldn't feel guilty because I don't have a hobby like yoga or gardening or whatever, right? It's perfectly fine that I live a life that I designed and work really hard to live a life that I designed and can be my full self. And that was to me that was a very valuable lesson that I don't need to feel like I'm missing out on something because I don't have a hobby of some sort. So that was, I don't know, I thought a great lesson.
Where could you have benefited more from the wisdom of community?
Yeah, so I about a year ago, I was invited to like a mastermind group. And so basically, what this was, it's a group of entrepreneurs that get together every month for dinner, very successful entrepreneurs. And they basically kind of like share their experiences. You learn from each other, that sort of thing. And the first time that I went, I felt extremely intimidated because all of these business owners were. Quite older than me and had been in business for much longer than me and had the success metrics that were a lot higher than me. And I thought, well, what am I doing here? How did I get invited to this? Like, this is so out of my league. And I let that lack of confidence and that imposter syndrome prevent me from feeling like I was worthy enough to keep going and keep showing up. And I stopped. And so I still have a little tinge of regret for doing that because I think I deserved to have shown up for myself, even if it didn't feel totally comfortable. Maybe it would have at some point, and maybe I could have learned so much. Like, there's no doubt I would have learned so much. But I neglected to show up for myself in that moment. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think I could have benefited more if I had, yeah, definitely pushed through it.
Yeah. Interesting that we're still intimidated by some situations where we lose our voice or we don't use our voice. And in that situation, you could have contributed as well. We need contribution from all generations because, like you said before, technology has opened up a lot of opportunities for every generation if we're willing to be open minded. But we also need to be open minded about what each generation brings to the pool. The new views on creativity versus the views on building a good, solid business with metrics, whatever they are. Even the point that not every business has to be built to sell. Like
Right.
there are a lot of lifestyle businesses that are doing very well. Well, in the past, one of the biases was that really all you've done is formed a job for yourself. When actually, like you said, you bring your whole self to whatever you're doing, that entrepreneurial spirit, that entrepreneurial initiative. And you benefit from it, and everyone else benefits from it.
I agree. And actually, to your point, I had a great conversation with someone who's a mentor of mine at BDC, and she shared a similar sentiment. She's sharing that we are like you shared, we're seeing more and more lifestyle businesses, and there is this perception somewhat that it's just basically creating a life for yourself and that's it. But we're now pushing that, where banks and institutions like BDC, for example, are now recognizing how much value that these lifestyle businesses actually play to our economy and our society. And so they are actually working harder to include more of those businesses into their portfolios, which is great. Whereas before,
Good.
you see the typical corporate type of business structures,
So they've seen the light as well.
exactly, which is great to see. And they were extremely happy. Like when we captured, the data points of the Founders Fund, a huge percentage. I can't recall off the top of my head. I want to say around 30 to 35% of the businesses that were involved with the Founders Fund identify as lifestyle businesses,
Mhm.
which is great. Because again, it's like it's giving the people who are involved with those businesses an opportunity to bring their full selves to work while also contributing, some value in the form of products or services or what it might be to their own communities or society. And, also creating like even more of an opportunity for their family to thrive as well.
Mhm. Yeah, women's economic empowerment is very important. For It's always has been, but I think we're seeing more focus on it. And I'm so glad that organizations like BDC see this as a lifestyle business, not as a hobby, because
Right.
that was the other bias with women's businesses, that it was just a hobby. So. Where do you think you're going to be in, say, 5 years? I know 5 years is way out there, but you talk about 2020. What about 2025?
Yeah, we want accessibility is really at the forefront of every decision that we make with the Founders Fund. Every time we want to implement something, we think, does this help make it more accessible, or are we potentially creating a barrier or an unintentional bias? And so, like, being very, very aware and thoughtful of all of these decisions that go into, the final outcome of everything that we do. And so, in 5 years from now, I would like to see what we are doing, what our goals are for 2020, accelerated in a continued upward direction, where we become such a widely recognized program, or really an online growth accelerator, like I said, at a national level. I think that because we have such a close community, like in the Ontario entrepreneurship community, just because by default, like where I'm from and some of the people involved in building it, we are working so hard to spread that message across the country. And even though we were able to capture in 2019, I think 11 out of the 13 provinces and territories for applicants, we want to see higher data points across the entire country, not this congregated areas in certain parts of the country. We really want to make it as accessible as possible. And so, yeah, we want to become a proudly, nationally recognized growth accelerator for women identifying entrepreneurs, where we see a lot of equality in entrepreneurship throughout the Canadian landscape for women entrepreneurs.
What advice would you like your future self, say your 60-year-old entrepreneur, to be able to impart and present yourself in the beginning and throughout your entrepreneurial experience?
Honestly, it goes back to that wisdom that I received 2 years ago. Continue to build a life that works for you and a life that you can bring your full self to every single day. That is the wisdom that I would continue to impart on myself and anybody else in their entrepreneurial journey at every stage. Because as you know, the barriers and the challenges that we face as entrepreneurs, there are so many lows, and it can be isolating. It can be really hard. There can be so many times when we're ready to give up, but if you've created at minimum that space where you can show up and be you and feel good about the work that you're doing, I think it helps to overcome those challenges. And that in itself continues to be self motivating to push through and build that resiliency.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience, Sheena, and your wisdom as well. I just want to let our audience know that information about your company, Tease Tea, and the Founders Funding, or the Founders Fund, can be found in the description below on this video. You have a wonderful day. I know you and I are going to be in touch on a regular basis, and I am very happy that we had this conversation today.
Likewise, such a pleasure for me too. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Thank you.